Well, if we're done panel for now, it's time to open up the discussion to the audience and questions, comments, and discussion. And if we can have you step up to the microphone in the middle, this is, for the web streaming and the television. If you're not speaking in the microphone, no one outside of here will hear you.
I've got a question, and it's really about seismic hazard. Oh, I'm sorry.
Close. Is that on? All right. Can you have people here? Okay.
It's really about seismic hazard, but it crosses over to geology, so I thought I'd ask it. I assume it will come back again. I know that a lot of the critique of this that has been published in letters to the editor and other places has focused on the hazard of active faults, and specifically they've talked about the Castle Mountain fault, which in some of the maps dead ends up more towards Lake Clark, and suggested that that there is some evidence, possibly, the critiques say, that that fault is still active in the vicinity of the mine area. So your mapping said all of those faults are inactive. If there were active faults of that significance in that area, would you know about it, and what's the evidence of the Castle Mountain fault being either inactive or not active in that area?
Before
that makes sense. And are you the right people to ask it to?
We would ask everyone who comes up to ask a question or comment, please introduce yourself with your name and affiliation.
My name's Bob Leffler. I'm actually I do consulting work for the Lake Peninsula Borough, and I just know this is a question of concern.
The faults that I spoke about in the deposit area are small-scale faults that are not really associated with the Castle Mountain fault.
Okay, so does the critique indicates that there could be some evidence the Castle Mountain fault is active in that area. Do you know if that's true or not?
I'm assuming that'll be covered in the seismicity portion later today.
Next question, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Dave Chambers. I'm with the Center for Science and Public Participation, which is a nonprofit. Permafrost, the presence of permafrost can actually have some potential geotechnical impacts in terms of, if you build a structure on them and melt the permafrost, it might change the foundation considerations. In your drilling, geotechnical and core drilling, did you see any evidence of permafrost at all in that area?
We actually did find some relict ice lenses, but that is the only evidence of permafrost we found so far. And it was only localized in a small area where there's known to be a thicker peat deposits at the surface.
How deep were those ice lenses?
I think the deepest one was about 40 feet.
I'm Jim Brown, and I'm a emeritus professor from Alaska Pacific University. And in addition to that academic work, I've spent quite a bit of my past career working on consulting projects, mostly in the area of soils-related engineering. So my question gets into the physiography and a little bit with the permafrost. So the first question is using this comment that on our most recent studies that we've done on, say, the Northwest Gas Line project, we went from the old terminology of the physiographic provinces and divisions to the newer one of the ecoregions of Alaska. And I was wondering, let me say it this way, we did that in part because with that project we're getting back into the environmental vegetation and animals, so we used the ecoregions concept. and broke it up into much more detail than physiographic system was allowed to do. So the question is, A, why didn't you do this in the past? And B, would you be interested in doing that in the future?
Yes, I'd be interested in talking to you about that. I can't really say why we didn't per se, but we definitely would like to look at all sources of information. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, my name is Thomas Tilden, and I'm the chief for the Chuging tribe. And first off, I have to a little disclosure to make that we were one of the tribes that had asked EPA to come in to do a scientific study, and actually we even asked them to do a 404C. However, they haven't done that. So, but anyway, I just have to let you know that, and I think that it's important to disclose that, as well as basically the reason why we did it. We felt that we'd get a very independent study, and we couldn't buy them. So, but anyway, my question is in regards to the soil study. I believe it was Craig Nistor that in your soil study, I think you identified two areas as 1A7 and 1A9 that was the overwhelming majority of the study area, and that you had identified it as typic quiet depth acidic soils. And my question is that since this is a majority of the area that we're talking about, that where the proposed mine is going to be, during this exploratory work, digging into that type of soil, would it harm any of the salmon or animals in the area? And I must point out to you that the reason why I'm asking this question is that we, as Alaska Native people who live in that area, who have fished that stream, ever since exploratory work has begun, have noticed that there has been a sharp decline in salmon in the Coctulis River, where folks used to go up there and get their red salmon, their spawn-out salmon, and take it home and dry. And then all of a sudden, ever since exploratory work has begun, it has disappeared. And my question is, during this exploration phase, could digging into this type of soil, such as acidic, could it have run off and harmed that stream and killed the salmon in that area?
Louise, can you comment on site work?
I mean, I think there's a pretty strong commitment about managing any water runoff, soil disturbance associated with exploration. I mean, in fact, there's no roads out there. It's all helicopter based. There's no direct input of the water from the drilling programs into the streams. It's all accumulated in the tundra. So yeah, to me it seems like everything's being done as possible to minimize any of that soil running off into the water.
Did you guys actually measure soil pH anyplace? It's pretty easy to do.
Again, this was just a general characterization.
And just to clarify, that the degree of acidity, these are not pHs that are super low. They're maybe 6, 5, if that. They're just left of neutral. So
pretty different from what we're talking about with acid mine runoff. Yeah.
Plus, these areas are natural at this point. I mean, that's the way the soils are currently, and they have been that way for a long time.
it's largely a result of decomposition of organic matter that produces organic acid, humic acids that can leach.
People are complaining they can't hear you. Maybe speak to the mic.
All right. Sorry,
Thank you.
I'll try to have a microphone in front of me here. These soils are acidic, but they're not what you would imagine something you'd put into a car battery. So they're just a little bit lower than neutral, and they largely form by breakdown of organic matter, and they're quite striking to see because of that. But yeah.
I guess in reading some of the studies that were done up in that area, there was a compound issue that I guess I was concerned about. Number one, this type of soil was acidic naturally,
Right.
and then number two was that the mining company was using fluids that were not to be used around salmon spawning streams, and they drilled something like 1,200 holes up in that area, and then the other thing that you add to is that eventually, if you dig 1,200 holes, I'm sure you're going to run into some sort of streams or water bodies that are groundwater, and that's probably going to come flooding up. And so you combine all of that during the exploration, and then like I said, the people that depend on that river, that have gone up there and watched that river thrive for thousands of years, and all of a sudden, within 1 decade, it's wiped out. And so that was why I was asking whether or not that with this combination of this compounded effect happening to that during the exploration phase, could that have killed that river?
I might chime in here. This is an important question, but I think it maybe more appropriately can be discussed with the water quality on Thursday when that subject comes up, and also with the fisheries panel discussion, which is next week. I might add that questions like this are sometimes very hard to answer because you have to know and have good data on the natural variability of fish like salmon, which changes a lot, and we don't always know why, and try to discriminate that natural variability with the possible contamination of exploration and so forth. Can we go to the next question, please?
Mr. Chairman, I guess if that's the proper way to start. Mr. Chairman and the panelists, I was intrigued by the information I heard this morning from you. However, I am not a rock scientist, so I'll just, my comments will be primarily through the process, I guess, of what I'm seeing here. For the record, my name is Joe Treifler from Bristol Bay. I currently serve on the Bristol Bay Corporation Board. I'm also a tribal member of Village Leknegik, and for most of my life I've been a commercial fisherman and subsistence user in Bristol Bay. So that's kind of who I am. And also I just retired recently from 21 years of public service, state of Alaska, working with Alaska Board of Fisheries and Board of Game as a staffer in my region. And so I guess I'm familiar with most familiar with the process than the rocks that I heard you guys discuss. You know, one observation I see right off, and I've observed from day one, I guess, Keystone process was started by the very folks who wanted to develop this mine. And I guess this, first of all, calls into question how objective this process may be. And then just recently I read and heard that one of our key scientists from Bristol Bay was dismissed from the panel. Dr. Sindler, a recognized Bristol Bay fishery expert. And I guess the question I ask is why he's not here today. However, I want to also compare this process to a process that we in Bristol Bay were part of this past spring. As mentioned by Tom, Bristol Bay Tribes and Bristol Bay Native Corporation and many people within the region who rely on fishing for their jobs invited EPA to come and hold public hearings, and then the idea being to try to help deal with the threats that are posed by the Pebble Mine. EPA did come and conduct the hearings, and it was more of an open public type hearing, transparent, and it included all of Bristol Bay Watershed folks. And we held our meetings in Bristol Bay. I guess as a result, and I think these are published figures, over 90% of the people who participated in the process, EPA process, hearings support EPA, and I want to say on the record that I do as well. I guess one of my concerns is that, and I heard this a couple of times, not just here, but also at the EPA follow-up hearings last August, is that the idea or notion that there is no plan in place. But this Pebble discussion has been going on since 1985. And if there's no plan in place, why are we still discussing? I guess my thinking is that this idea or notion that there is no plan maybe is not true. I believe that from what I've seen, that Pebble has multiple mining plans, probably in their files that they haven't brought out to the public yet. And I guess your adherence to the Pebble mantra, that there's no mining plan yet, further, in my opinion, underscores the objectivity, I guess, of a panel or discussion of this sort. So I just wanted to share these comments I had on the process, and I hope, in further hearings in the future, that you would involve more people from the region that have been feeling for the last 27 years some of the issues and discussion that have been on the table. So thank you for allowing me to make these few comments.
Thank you for your comments. Louise and Craig, do you have anything to respond with?
Yeah, I guess I have one comment about the mine plans. But sometimes people see that as a negative thing, that the mine plan is still under development. I think it should be recognized that's a positive thing, that every single option and interaction between the different components of the environment and the mine are being considered. Nothing before this thing can go into the environmental permitting phase. The mine plan has to be made public. Everyone will have a chance to look at it. So it's I'm not quite sure why, or it shouldn't be considered something that's being hidden and is being done in secret. It's just that every single option is being considered, and there's thousands of variables that are all being considered. So frankly, it would just be too confusing to lay everything on the table. You just wouldn't be able to understand it. It's I don't mean you personally, I mean any of us. And once the best possible plan is worked out, then it will come out. So
also, we can't forget that Pebble continues to explore and continues to find other sources of mineralization, and then that all has to be taken into consideration as well.
Did you guys want to answer his question on the dismissal of the panelists?
Yeah, maybe we'll leave that to one of the Keystone people.
Now, that was mentioned by Todd, and he's right here to answer it again.
That's a question that I wanted to save for the lunch period, so we can have a. I'd like to utilize the panel members while they're here to the best ability we can. But I think one of the interesting questions that I would like for you all to pose to them is we had one panel member who dropped off the panel because he felt that we needed the actual mine plan in order to evaluate the baseline studies. That issue has never come up in any of our panel discussions until just a couple of weeks ago when it was raised by David Montgomery. The non Pebble scientists who've evaluated the baseline studies, the Nature Conservancy and the consultants that were working on the evaluating the baseline studies didn't require a mine plan when they did their evaluations. When EPA did their evaluation, they used a hypothetical mine plan. They didn't use the actual mine plan, and we don't have one, so we can't use it. And I don't have any opinion about where it is or whether it exists. I have to take that on face value. So I don't know any more than any of you do about that. With Dr. Montgomery, we actually offered to provide him with the hypothetical mine plan that EPA used in their evaluation, and that wasn't sufficient either. So I think the more interesting question, that's all I know because that's the only discussions that I've had, but I think it's a good question to ask these panel members because they're participating and believe that they can evaluate the baseline studies without having the actual mine plan to evaluate. So I think it's a good question. So we have enough information about the mine footprint. We have enough information about where things are likely to go. We know where the road corridor is. We know where the port is likely to be. We know where the deposit is. We don't know how big it is, how big or small it is. That's an important question. But I think, so I want to talk more about this at lunch if there's an opportunity, but that's my sort of brief response. I think that it's a good question for all the scientists, and I wouldn't want to answer that question for them.
My name is Russell Nelson. I work as a Director of Facilities at Dillingham City School District in Dillingham. I'm also a BB&C board member and have been for over 6 years. I've lived in Dillingham for over 56 years. I'm a pilot. I've flown my little airplane that I own right now around Dillingham and all of Bristol Bay and clear into Anchorage for the last 25 years. I've flown over that side numerous times. I'm also a subsistence hunter-fisher person who provides for my extended family. I received an AA degree from UAF Bristol Bay campus 4 years ago and plan on graduating with my bachelor's degree this coming spring. I've worked real hard to educate myself about the Pebble project for the past 8+ years. I've attended the EPA meetings in Bristol Bay. In Dillingham, over 100% of the locals who spoke to the EPA case were against the project. I trust the EPA process and feel that they're truly independent. This process, though, that I feel is pretty flawed. It feels really controlled. The process asks non-PLP studies to be peer-reviewed and to provide unlocked data, which is really good. What's wrong with this process here is you guys don't ask PLP to do the same thing you're asking other people to do. You don't tell them they have to provide unlocked data, and you don't tell them that they have to have all this stuff peer-reviewed before their stuff is good. And then you ask, you allow PLP to comment on the non-PLP studies before it even comes back out again. It's just not a fair process. You know, I really do feel this process is flawed, and I think I'll rest my faith on the EPA process. Thank you.
This is something that I also wanted to talk about at lunch, but there is some I think miscommunication about this idea that there's a double standard from what we're requiring of EPA, or not EPA, what we're requiring of Pebble and what we're requiring of non-Pebble scientists in terms of submitting information or white papers to us. The Keystone Center requested that that Pebble give us data in a user-friendly format. That was one of our important considerations in developing this process. We also requested the same kind of information in a user-friendly format from the non-PLP scientists who were submitting white papers for our panel members' review. So we applied the same standard. We asked for information to be given to us in an unencrypted, not password protected, digital format, and Pebble decided not to do it. And Jane talked about their reasoning for that, but they decided not to do it. As far as I know, the non-PLP scientists gave us their information in basically the same format. So neither one of them actually complied with our request. So we asked for the same information in a user-friendly format. We didn't get it from Pebble. We're disappointed, as I mentioned in the opening kind of statement. We believe that that in a scientific review process that's the way that data should be provided. In a normal peer review process, that is the way that data is provided. In a regulatory setting like this, it's a different story. So we weren't able to get past that fully, but we applied the same standard. We actually got information from from non-PLP scientists and Pebble, and we got it in the same format. It's neither one of them is easily converted to the kind of data where you could do a fairly easy reanalysis. So I think it's, having said that, obviously 27,000 pages of reanalysis of 27,000 pages is very different than the reanalysis of a 30-page study. But the standard was the same. So, but again, I want to kind of, we've got these panel members here. They've got tremendous amount of expertise. They spent a lot of time looking at the baseline studies. Baseline studies are tremendously important to this process. So we can talk about the Keystone Center. I think they're all valid questions, and I'm happy to answer all of them. But I'd like to keep the discussion focused on the panel if we could. So if any of you have any comments on any of this you want to share, that's perfectly fine.
I do. I think I'm perhaps speaking for my colleagues here, but I think all of us collectively have been involved with peer-reviewed science throughout all of our careers. I mean, I've served as an associate editor of a number of scientific journals and routinely review manuscripts, several a month, as I'm sure you guys do. And I can say that my feeling is that same level of rigor was applied to our review of this baseline document that we would apply to any scientific product we are asked to review. So from that standpoint, I think we're applying the same scientific standards to this document that we'd apply to anything that we received. So from that perspective, I don't think the process is flawed per se.
I'd just like to add one thing, and that is we need to keep in mind the EPA process is very different from this Keystone Dialogue process. And so they can't really be directly compared. The EPA process was a response to a request for a watershed risk assessment, and that was done. We're not responding to a watershed risk assessment. What we're doing is trying to, through scientific peer review, to evaluate the baseline documents, and that's different. The EPA process was not to evaluate the baseline documents. So these things are I see them as complementary and not necessarily different. Next question, please.
Yeah, my name is Kimberly Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of Nunamta Lixtai. I used to work for the university, and I peer-reviewed documents for the university in my job before. So I can appreciate your time and effort to peer-review the science. I guess the question that I have really gets back to what Tommy has asked, is that if given the volume of pyrite in this deposit, and not knowing how much pyrite we're going to use and process, but how much is going to be left there, and given the fact that we've got 1,200 drill sites already with holes, and that have, you know, the drill sites then have 3 holes that they put the mud in and whatever comes out of that hole, or 6 holes in that. Given that and the reclamation on those drill sites, I would think that there's enough information, there should be enough information to really say how these soils are going to handle that pyrite. But given that you haven't done it, so I guess I'm a little perplexed on the studies that you haven't done enough. But here we are, people from Bristol Bay who have valid concerns about this pyrite and acid-generating rock, given no mine plan. But we know there are some mine plans because PLP has asked for all the water rights in some of the rivers that have salmon in them. So to me, we're left with, okay, well, wait, but I need to know, or we all need to know, how much of that pyrite is acid generating, and given the fact that the consultants are saying, well, PLP has not finished their mineralization, they're looking at other deposits or they're expanding. So when do we get that number? And when do we get that process of how we're going to handle it? I mean, at what point in time do we say, okay, this is the true story about the deposit and the pyrite, and this is what's left over? I guess I'm still wondering and waiting, and it's been 8 years, and you've got 4 years of data, but you've got ongoing studies. So you've got another 4 years of data. When do we compile all that? Are we just waiting to wait, and then all of us from Bristol Bay kind of say we give up and just say enough is enough, and we roll over and let Pebble do whatever they want? Because people of Bristol Bay who rely on salmon, all of us, have valid concerns about that pyrite. And I think the consultants, if you're getting paid big bucks to do this, give us the right number. Give us the number of what that volume is so that we have some idea of what's going to happen to those streams. Because there's sure a lot of water up there. It is not dry. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to respond?
Sure. Well, I think that tomorrow morning, the consulting company SRK will give a presentation that will give you a summary of the work that was done on essentially trying to predict acid-generating characteristics of these rocks. So their work is what I've focused on in my review. And I said earlier today that I'll kind of reserve comment until they've made their presentation, and then I can ask questions of those people. But I think their summary will include numbers that talk, essentially about volumes and tonnages, hopefully. And but the real question then is, so okay, we could find out that the majority of the rock is expected to be acid generating, and I think many of you probably already know that that's the case. But the real question then becomes, how do they deal with that? How does Pebble deal with that? We don't have the mine plan. If we had the mine plan, then we would have a much better idea of how they plan to deal with that. So you could find out that it's all acid generating, and Pebble could come back and say, well, we have a plan to contain it. But we just don't know that yet. So we'll have to, from our point of view, we just have to take it one step at a time. We kind of review, as I've done, the data that they're presenting, the numbers that they're presenting, and talk about whether it's good quality and what we think of it. But then I think we all have to wait and see what Pebble comes back with, because we just don't know what the impacts to the environment might be until we know how they plan to manage it. So that's a bit of a dilemma right now.
Any other panelists care to say anything?
Yeah, I guess there might be a bit of a confusion about geochemical characteristics of the soil. I mean, the soil is the top 1 or 2 feet of great thickness of rock that's going to be handled and whatnot. So we certainly have, I mean, that falls within the overall geochemical discussion. And what you're saying is true, that they figure out the balance of what's getting treated and what's getting stored as waste rock and whatnot. That's still in the planning stages, but pretty much everything that gets handled and disturbed and moved and stockpiled or processed, it'll all be contained and treated and managed in some way. And that's so what we're talking about today is what's there now, what's in the ground, and then how it all gets handled and treated. That's the mine plan. That's taking a long time to develop because it's a very complicated thing to do.
But if you have 1,200 drill sites, you have 3 holes that you put the drill mud into that site, then you reclaim that area, or you have 6 holes that you put the mud in. And we have photos of all that from Rick Halford. And we have a sump report done by Dr. Carol Ann Woody that says what's going into those holes from the drill site is actually some of the deposit. That is acid generating. So you should have some idea over the course of your studies what's happening in those areas that are reclaimed. And that's not what I'm hearing from you guys. So I'm hearing you say, this is the deposit, this is what we're studying, but you have an ongoing exploration program that already has some impact.
Yeah, so let's bring that up again in the water quality. Is that tomorrow, I believe? Yeah.
But also, you can't forget that pyrite has to be exposed to oxygen in order to generate acid. And it's a long process. It's not instantaneous.
Okay, we have another question.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Peter Andrew. I'm a lifelong Bristol Bay fisherman. I'm on the board of directors of BBNC, and I'm a subsistence user. In the 225 years existence of our country, we have managed to work our way across from east to west. This pebble deposit's size and location are known. We know that. We know where it is. We know what's there. Inevitably, this fight is going to become about two values. Looking across America, you all are wonderful scientists. You know each other's trade, and you test theory after theory after theory. But what I come to find out, in the 225 years across the country, we've managed to eradicate every salmon stream across America and spend millions of dollars trying to bring them back with no success. Science at work, fine science, over and over, peer review, peer review, peer review. Here we are at the farthest western point in our great country, the last place. We've already come from east to west. Here we are. Now we're going to base our theory on science. Science also told me that we've had 5,000 plus years of salmon species in this beautiful place. 5,000 years. There's no way you could argue against that. And maybe as long as 10,000 years. My culture is dependent on it. I'm scared as hell for the generations to come. Here we're going to put our faith in science, where we could look back on America and what we have done already. We know, inevitably, if this area was to be mined, we know the outcome. Superfund site, no more salmon. I am going to put my faith, my career as a commercial fisherman, and a subsistence hunter-gatherer, in the faith of EPA, because we've asked them to come and do an assessment. The state of Alaska's not listening. Pebble's not listening. Things are stacked up against us. Where do I turn? That's my comment. And I thank you for your time, for doing your peer review. But facts are facts. You guys know that. You deal in science. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or responses from anybody? Jeremy.
Could I make just a sort of a general observation? I think perhaps we're all struggling a little bit with the role of this document and the distance that it goes towards some of the concerns that that you might have about impacts. The EBD doesn't address impacts, and it doesn't address possible mining scenarios, intentionally so. But of course, we're all sort of thinking forward to, so what does it mean? And as a peer reviewer, this document to me is like a paper without a conclusion. You know, we're waiting for the punchline, and the punchline depends on what is ultimately done. If all you're planning to do in this area is build a fishing lodge, then the baseline study is wonderful, it's fantastic. If you're planning to build a mine of the size that the EPA modeled, then I think the baseline document, the information in there needs to address some of the obvious things that you're going to do. You're going to build a very large hole in the ground, which is going to affect water, and you're going to pile up a lot of waste rock, which is potentially going to generate acid. So I think the EBD, in that respect, I think we're all kind of reading it and thinking, well, okay, as a baseline, it's fine, that the data collection is fine, and so on and so forth. But how do we then interpret it in these various scenarios? And that's the bit that I don't think we've got to yet. I think, in a sense, you know, we're jumping the gun trying to do that. But clearly, that's of greatest concern to everyone in this room. Where do we go from this point? So I don't know whether the consultants would want to respond to that. I mean, should we just stop at this point saying it's a data collection exercise and we shouldn't be thinking beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We've collected an amazing amount of information, and we're still going. And I think there's just a feeling that it was time to share some of this information and get these sort of discussions going, but it wasn't because we felt we were done. Mm-hmm. And this is the end point. It was just there's a lot of people interested in the topic, and it was useful to get it out there. So yeah, we recognize it's a big, complicated project, and we really need to understand the environment that it's situated in. So
I think the problem is that it raises so many questions in people's mind, but each time you raise the question, you know, you're met with, well, we haven't done that yet, or we haven't, you know, we don't have a plan. So I'm not sure myself where to sort of put my thoughts about this, because it depends on so many things which are undisclosed, undecided at this point in time.
Yeah.
Okay, we only have a little bit of time left, and I'd like to get through as many of these questions as we can. Next, please.
My name is Lindsay Bloom. I'm also a lifelong Alaskan and Bristol Bay commercial fisherman for a long time. I also work for Trout Unlimited here in Alaska. I'm wondering, for the panelists, if you guys were provided with the comments that state and federal agency scientists provided to the Pebble Partnership, like a long, long time ago, about the initial study designs that they started around 2003 or 2004. And if not, I'd like to just make a comment about them. Have you guys seen those? So I think you're at a disadvantage today with this process, and I'm sorry that, you know, that's how we're spending our time when there's so many unknowns and everyone's still struggling with so many things. I mean, I think I'm one of the stakeholders that this process was set up by Keystone to try to educate and inform more about the baseline data. Unfortunately, I'm leaving with a lot more questions than answers. But I do know, and it is a matter of public record, that when the baseline studies first started, and I was, you know, commercial fishing and making my living in Bristol Bay at that time, there, you know, again, Pebble tried to do a process that was somewhat similar to this. It was called the Scientific Technical Working Groups, and they shared study designs and asked for state and federal agencies to provide comments and feedback, which they did. However, a lot of it was critical, and a lot of it questioned methodology, scope of studies, questions that were being asked, et cetera, And I do not believe that those questions and concerns by scientists at that time were ever adequately addressed. So now we're just looking at this raw data, and I disagree with you that it could be data just for data. I think data is controlled by the question that's asked when you seek to collect it, and I'm very concerned about the questions that were asked. I think that there is something to hide, that they're not presenting that today, and I think that you're at a disadvantage because you can't see that and you didn't see the study designs before you were asked to decide whether or not this data set is adequate for eventually planning or permitting a mine. It's just bogus. It's disappointing.
Any comments? I think a lot of those earlier studies are basically obsolete or are not that relevant anymore. There's been so many changes. And of course, this is one of the difficult things is a lot of the plans do change rapidly over time. No comments from panelists?
I'll just make just one comment. Just what Lindsay says is absolutely correct. That the best science is hypothesis-driven science, where you set out to answer a well-formulated question. You collect data specifically to address that. Science that's done kind of, let's go collect a bunch of data and then come up with a story is often very unsatisfying. So this is a matter of style among some scientists. But I would agree that hypothesis-driven investigations tend to provide much better science. So.
Okay, I would ask those of you who are waiting to ask a question, please keep your question very focused and on the geology. Please.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Anders Sr. I'm from the village of New Stuya on the Nushagak River. My community will be first affected from the Cockatoola River to Two Forks. 510 people live there. Every person there depends on subsistence, from salmon to moose to berries to everything, for thousands of years. My father was a reindeer herder. And today not just long ago, a few days ago, before I came out here, I went up that river. And guess what? I don't take water from my house. I get my water from the spring water when I go out and go hunt and camp. That's how clear that water is, that I depend on my family and the game. This year, the Nushagak produced over 100,000 of kings that went up that river. We depend on that fish, that king salmon and other species, other 5 species. Year after year, the villages there hang strips, fish, to make it through the winter. Look at the high cost of gas and stuff. We depend on subsistence, 110 plus. And I want to pass that on. We want to pass that on. Another 100 years to my grandkids and their kids. To top it off, it's just like a national treasure. Them waters, that Nushagak River, feeds the ocean with the smolts that's coming down. For thousands of years, that pebble shouldn't even step foot in there in the first place. It shouldn't even happen. Look at the other areas. Look at other mines. I was just recently on a trip outside. Flew over some mines. I was shaking my head. My grandkids and other kids wouldn't survive that. They will not. It's unacceptable, totally unacceptable to put a big hole in the ground in front of our headwaters. It's unacceptable. It's just as good, like a national treasure. Look at people from all over that go do sports fishing. Look at people that come and visit us. There's not very many places like that in this globe. One of the elders told me before I came out here, I wish these scientists would spend some time with us, even a winter, to do real science of how we live to survive in that country. Go out there. And in the first place, this meeting should have been happening in our region in Bristol Bay. It should have been out there in Bristol Bay, where that's going to be happening. Thank you.
Okay, in the interest of time, if we have 2 more people, I think we'll limit it to that, and then we'll be taking the lunch break. Please.
Good morning. My name is Werner Wilson. I'm Yupik, or part of the Tuliung tribe from Dillingham. I grew up in Dillingham. I'm a fisherman. I go out to fish with my family every year. And I just wanted to relay some points from my parents. They still live in Dillingham. That they said it's a damn shame that you guys are not doing your meetings out in the Bristol Bay area, because that's where the people who are going to be most affected are living at, and they live there all year round. And these people here from the region, they flew out here at high expense. It's not cheap, and I just hope that Keystone, first of all, will have meetings out in the region. If you're going to do any more meetings, then you really have to answer to the people who are going to be most affected. And as a young fisherman, I want to be able to fish in the future. And I just wanted to point out to some of the comments that were made by you about the 0.42% copper, for example. Does that mean that like over 99% of all that is going to be mined is going to be waste? And also, I also wanted to know about how much of the information was taken from the fact that Pebble already violated their permits. And in 2010, a lot of us young people from Bristol Bay, we were very concerned about that, because if Pebble, for example, is already violating the permits and the agreements with the state of Alaska, what can we expect in the future? Now, I guess Pebble is asking to drill right next to important salmon spawning creeks and rivers. And so, first of all, I wanted to ask about the copper question, the 0.42%, and also how much information was taken from the violated permits by Pebble.
Okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
I'll take a shot at the 0.42%. Yes, you're correct. The remaining 99.6% is effectively waste.
And the permits, I don't really know what that's about. So, ask me about physiography.
And about the question of why not have the panel meeting in, say, Dillingham or someplace around Bristol Bay, I like that idea myself, and we have started discussing that actually. We don't know, how that's going to farm out, but it's a good suggestion. Next.
My name is Brian Coyle, and I'm a geophysicist and hydrogeologist. I'm not affiliated with anybody at this present time, but I do have an interest in this project because most of my career has been spent doing site characterization, some for mining companies, also a bit of radioactive waste site characterization. So my question's a technical one. It has to do with your drilling and coring program. Could you tell me a little bit about how that was targeted? Were they spot cores? You have dedicated core holes? And were you just looking at the extent of the ore body, or were you also trying to cite holes that would help you characterize the groundwater flow system, and in particular how the fractures might contribute to that?
Yes, we've had all of those kinds of drill holes at the site for water characterization, for geotechnical characterization, for just pure exploration of the ore body. All of that types of drilling are being done.
Like what percentage are core?
They're all core.
Well, the tricone bits you put up there don't produce core. So.
Oh no, tricone doesn't produce core.
So spot cores, what percentage, and of the 1,200 drill holes, say, how many of those were core?
Well, they were all cored because after the tricone was used, they used a diamond bit. They only did the triconing in the overburden, and then once they reached the bedrock.
So all the bedrock was cored? Yes. Okay. And what percent were targeted outside of the ore body?
I have no idea. I would have to look that up.
And there also were slug tests to get an idea of permeable fracture zones in the bedrock as well when they were drilling. And hopefully we'll hear more about that on Thursday. Okay, thank you very much for your participation. I appreciate that. We're now having a 1-hour lunch break, and we'll start again at about 1 o'clock.